Aldrich Ames, the CIA officer who sold his own agents to their deaths. He was a CIA officer with direct access to the names of every American spy operating inside the Soviet Union. He sold that list to the KGB for cash, and within months the agents on it started disappearing, one by one, executed. He kept collecting his CIA salary the entire time, driving a Jaguar nobody at the agency thought to ask him about. Aldrich Ames joined the CIA in 1962, eventually working his way into the agency's Soviet and Eastern European counterintelligence division, a position granting him genuinely extensive access to some of the CIA's most sensitive operational information regarding American intelligence assets operating within the Soviet Union, individuals whose actual identities and activities represented some of the most closely guarded secrets within the entire American intelligence apparatus. Given the catastrophic, often fatal consequences facing any Soviet citizen discovered providing intelligence to a foreign power. By 1985, Ames, facing genuine mounting personal financial pressure, driven substantially by an expensive divorce and a subsequent lifestyle with his second wife that considerably exceeded what his actual CIA salary could reasonably support, made the calculated decision to approach Soviet intelligence officials directly, offering to sell classified information in exchange for payment, a decision that transformed him almost overnight from a mid-level American intelligence officer into one of the most damaging espionage assets the Soviet Union and later Russia would ever successfully recruit from within America's own intelligence community. What made Ames's specific betrayal genuinely, catastrophically damaging wasn't simply the volume of classified information he provided over the following 9 years, considerable as that volume proved, but the specific nature of what he chose to sell first and most consistently. The actual identities of Soviet citizens working as intelligence assets for the CIA and other American agencies, information that, once transmitted to Soviet intelligence, allowed Soviet counterintelligence services to systematically identify, arrest, and in numerous documented cases, execute the specific individuals Ames had personally exposed. American intelligence assets who had risked and ultimately lost their lives providing information to the United States, betrayed by an American officer motivated substantially by his own financial gain. Historians and intelligence researchers studying Ames's case have generally concluded that his information directly contributed to the exposure and subsequent execution of at least 10 Soviet citizens who had been working as American intelligence assets, along with the compromise of numerous additional intelligence operations and assets whose specific fates, whether execution, imprisonment, or simply permanent removal from any further intelligence value, remain less definitively documented in publicly available historical records, given the genuinely extensive scope of the classified operations Ames's betrayal ultimately compromised across nearly a decade of continued espionage. What made Ames's continued espionage activity genuinely, remarkably sustainable for as long as it proved, despite the catastrophic pattern of American intelligence losses his betrayal was directly causing, was a combination of factors that in retrospect reflected genuine, significant institutional failures within the CIA's own internal security and counterintelligence procedures. Ames began exhibiting genuinely obvious, conspicuous lifestyle changes almost immediately after beginning his espionage activities, purchasing a substantial suburban home entirely in cash, driving an expensive imported Jaguar automobile, and maintaining a level of personal spending that stood in stark, genuinely obvious contrast to his actual documented CIA salary, financial indicators that, had the agency's internal security procedures been genuinely rigorous at the time, should have triggered considerably earlier scrutiny than what actually occurred. The CIA did eventually launch a formal internal investigation specifically focused on identifying the source of the agency's mounting, genuinely alarming pattern of compromised Soviet intelligence assets throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s, a mole hunt that initially explored numerous potential explanations, including the possibility that Soviet intelligence had simply developed superior independent counterintelligence capabilities entirely unrelated to any internal American security breach, before investigators eventually, gradually narrowed their focus toward the specific possibility of an internal source actively providing information directly to Soviet intelligence. Ames was finally identified and arrested in February of 1994, following an extensive FBI investigation that included physical surveillance, examination of his financial records, and ultimately, direct access to Russian intelligence documents obtained through a separate cooperating source, providing definitive confirmation of Ames's specific role and the full scope of his espionage activities, evidence substantial enough to secure his formal arrest and prosecution without requiring the kind of extended, uncertain investigation that had characterized much of the preceding mole hunt. Ames pleaded guilty to espionage charges, avoiding a formal trial in exchange for cooperation with investigators seeking to fully understand the complete scope of information he had provided over nearly a decade of continued betrayal, and was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, a sentence he continues serving while his wife, Rosario Ames, who was found to have had knowledge of and involvement in benefiting from his espionage activities, received a considerably shorter prison sentence herself following her own guilty plea and cooperation with investigators. The Ames case produced genuinely significant, lasting institutional reforms within the CIA and broader American intelligence community, prompting substantially more rigorous internal financial disclosure and monitoring procedures specifically designed to detect exactly the kind of conspicuous, unexplained lifestyle changes that had, in Ames's specific case, gone unaddressed for years despite representing genuinely obvious warning signs that internal security procedures had simply failed to adequately investigate or escalate through appropriate channels. What makes Ames's case endure as one of history's most significant and damaging instances of intelligence betrayal isn't simply the scale of classified information he provided over nearly a decade, considerable as that scale genuinely remains, but the specific, deeply personal human cost his betrayal directly caused real individuals who had risked everything providing intelligence to the United States, systematically identified and killed as a direct, documented consequence of one American officer's calculated decision to trade their lives and safety for personal financial gain. A betrayal made considerably more damaging by the genuine institutional failures that allowed it to continue undetected for years, despite warning signs that, in retrospect, should have raised serious concern considerably earlier than they actually did. If stories like this, where a single person's financial greed directly cost real people their lives, hidden in plain sight for nearly a decade by an institution that should have caught it far sooner, are exactly what you come here for, subscribe to The Grave Details, because history holds more stories like this than most people will ever know.